Welcome back to Hardware Unboxed. A few days ago now, I finally got our GeForce RTX 2060 coverage online, and we've already received loads of great comments. I did predict that a replying to comments episode would likely follow after that video, and well, here it is. I did my best to cover the RTX 2060 and the entire RTX series in that video, but as expected, there were still quite a few good questions of things I either overlooked or really didn't have time to get into. But before I get into the comments and start the whole replying to comments thing, I do have an embarrassing confession to make. I screwed up the cost per frame graph in that video. Unfortunately, I was completely unaware of the mistake I'd made, and it wasn't until viewer Claus emailed me, pointed it out, that I was able to correct it. So I really appreciate him taking the time to point out my mistake. Claus was also right onto what I'd done wrong. I accidentally took the cost per frame data from the RX 570 video from a few days prior, and that was based on the 1080p results. I failed to update the FPS numbers to the 1440p results. So yeah, that's why they turned out to be a lot better value than they should have been. So I was meant to just copy and paste the actual value of the cards and not the cost per frame. So yeah, this meant that the GTX 1050 Ti, the 3GB and 6GB 1060, along with the RX 570 and 580, appeared to be much better value than they really were. So here is the original incorrect cost per frame graph, and well, here is how it should have looked. The second I was made aware of the mistake, I updated the TechSpot article and then pinned a comment with the correct graph on the video. But sadly, I couldn't go back and undo the damage already done, so please accept my apology for letting this embarrassing mistake slip by me. Okay, so let's get into what was by far the most discussed topic, and that was VRAM. There were hundreds upon hundreds of comments talking about the 6GB VRAM buffer of the RTX 2060, claiming that it wasn't enough and before too long it would become a major issue. Our viewer, the Mighty Wombat, noted that everyone keeps bringing up the 6GB versus 8GB debate, but fails to take into account that they're comparing GDDR6 with GDDR5. Presumably this is when talking about the GTX 1070 Ti and the 1080, for example. Let's talk about capacity first. It's true that right now for some titles 6GB is right on the edge, and under certain conditions may not be enough, though I'm yet to see a situation at 1440p that you can't tweak the settings to avoid flooding the VRAM buffer, and almost always you can do this with very little impact to the visual quality. So at least for now, 6GB of VRAM is fine at 1440p, and the benchmark data that I provided in my RTX 2060 review certainly supports that. We saw really solid 1% frame time performance in pretty much all the titles, and the only time it wasn't solid, I would say, is more a driver bug, as the 6GB 1060 was okay. So yeah, it suggests that it's not a VRAM capacity issue. How the 6GB buffer will fare in upcoming titles is yet to be seen, but at some point it will almost certainly be an issue for the 2060. But again, we'll just have to monitor things and see how this situation develops, and you can bet we'll do exactly that. As for the memory being faster, GDDR6 and all that, well, that's certainly nice, but it doesn't make up for a lack of capacity. And a perfect example of this would be the Fury X. Its super fast 4GB VRAM buffer became a major issue before too long. So I'll admit, paying $350 for a modern graphics card with just 6GB of memory is a bit of an issue, and it's something that I should have discussed more in my previous video. The problem is, for now, I can't really fault it, and I hate to guess as to when you'll start to run into trouble. My guess is that you'll probably be able to manage it for quite some time without really too much of an issue. Again, don't really want to put a frame time on this because I am just guessing, but I would say for at least the next year, possibly two, it'll be a pretty easy thing to manage. In a lot of titles, you probably won't have to manage anything at all. But again, that's just a guess. Time will tell. Okay, moving on. Black Widow said something along the lines of, on average, 53% faster than 1060 with same amount of VRAM for 40% more expensive. The 1060 was on average 70% faster than the 960 with 3 times as much VRAM, while it was only 25% more expensive. So all in all, the 2060 is not a good product. The reason why it looks so good now is because, well, basically saying the rest of the RTX series is bad. Yeah, I get where you're coming from, but it's a completely different market right now. So The GTX 960, that was one of the examples you gave, that had to compete with the R9 270X, 280 and 285. The RTX 2060, on the other hand, well, it has to compete with Vega 56, and I think it's pretty hard to argue that it doesn't. The RTX 2060 makes the 2070 look like a pretty poor value option, but as for the rest of the RTX series looking bad, as Black Widow puts it, it isn't the reason why the 2060 looks good. It looks good, or at least appealing, because it is the best value option at that price point. Moving on, I received loads of really nice comments, as we often do from you guys. That's always massively appreciated, and it helps us get through those big benchmark grinds. Anyway, the comment I want to point out here was from I think it was El Zamo or something like that. I don't actually have it in front of me now. I put the phone down, but I think it was El Zamo. Anyway, if I got that wrong, sorry. But I picked this one out as an example, not because there was anything wrong with the comment. It was quite nice, really. But there was something that I wanted to talk about here, and it was something that we discussed with our Patrons in last week's live stream. And yeah, it was something that I thought I needed to bring to the main channel. So after our video detailing what happened with Nvidia in regards to the RTX 2060 sample, a lot of people seemed to interpret that as being evidence of, well, I suppose all day one coverage being pure shield jobs to keep these companies happy for either free samples or advertising dollars, or perhaps both. So let me be clear about this. Most other tech media outlets that provide day one content are fair, neutral, and they aren't shills, as it's often put. For example, you might not agree with the Gamers Nexus RTX 2060 review. I actually still haven't watched that one yet, so shame on me. I'm a little bit behind on my GN content. I suppose that's both a good and a bad thing, depending on how you look at it. Anyway, getting a little sidetracked there. I'm using US Steve as an example here because, well, Gamers Nexus do incredibly good work. And it doesn't really matter whether their content's brought to you under embargo or if it's delivered at a later date. It really doesn't matter with those guys. It's going to be the same unbiased content every time. And, well, we hold ourselves to that same standard, and I know a lot of other media outlets do as well. So anyway, I just wanted to make it clear that we weren't suggesting that anyone who signs NDAs and gets samples ahead of release are any less honest than we are. No one really accused us of that. Certainly no other tech media did, but I just wanted to make that clear because we saw a few comments there and we thought, oh, okay, yeah, that may be taken the wrong way. So I just wanted to clear that up. Okay, comment here from Tank2G2 says that $399 Vega 64 is still a decent deal. Which is fair enough comment. There were a few people that were a little more agitated that I wasn't recommending Vega 64 because it is down to around $400. But I did point that out in my video. I just said that the $400 ones use the reference cooler, and yeah, not a big fan of that one. But yeah, it is a decent deal, to be honest. I personally would rather have the RTX 2060 though, just because it comes with a nice cooler. You can get the Zotac Gaming RTX 2060 twin fan. That can be had for $350, and it will almost certainly run cooler and quieter. Again, I realize there is some risk associated with that 6GB VRAM buffer, but for $400, I would really want to be getting my hands on a custom AIB Vega 64 card, something with a good cooler, before I'd be willing to pull the trigger. That's just my personal preference, but yeah, that's why I'm not recommending Vega 64, because I wouldn't personally buy it myself for $50 more than the RTX 2060. Okay, another comment here. Wasn't too much of this criticism on this video, though I did see a few comments about the card that we used in the Vega 64 version, and it's come up a lot in the past. Basically, the comment is, can you please use another Vega? The Asus Strix suffers from throttling due to poor VRMs. Well-known issue, unfair comparison. I think it's actually the cooling on the VRMs and not the actual power delivery system itself. But yeah, it's my understanding that some of the earlier models had issues with the thermal pads. I believe they weren't covering the VRM entirely, the surface area of the power stages, and that would cause them to overheat, cause the card to throttle and whatnot. My Asus Vega 56 and 64 cards have had the thermal pads replaced, and according to the readouts in hardware info, are operating well within the expected parameters, and I'm also not seeing any core throttling. I should also just point out, it was there in the graphs, but I'll point out anyway, that my Asus Vega 64 card kept up really well with the liquid version. So that is Vega 64 liquid, and I would have thought that would be the ultimate out-of-the-box benchmark. So based on all information, I would have to say that the card isn't throttling, it's not an unfair comparison, and again, the Vega 64 liquid results were included in that video. Alright, another Vega-related question here. Mate, can you do tweaked AIB Vega 56 undervolted / overclocked versus AIB 2060 overclocked? Stock Vega is pretty underwhelming, but tweaked it's a different beast, running fast with significantly lower power draw. Yeah, look, this is something I could do, and I actually have done similar sort of content in the past. If I do an updated version, it's not going to be a big benchmark video. It'll just be a look at how they compare with the tweak settings and a few newer, more demanding titles. With this stuff, your mileage, it will vary when undervolting. So some cards will undervolt really well, some not so well. It's really just like overclocking. It's a silicon lottery deal. So to say all cards will undervolt like champs is a bit misleading, or very misleading. And honestly, I don't know what the average result for undervolting is. Alright, this next comment is from Jack VR. While I definitely agree with most that the price for what you get is too high, I strongly disagree that nobody asked for ray tracing. Nobody in their right mind would say, I don't want better effects. What you don't want is poor performance. This is literally the first time we've ever had ray tracing in real time, which is impressive for a single card to do in the first generation of ray tracing cards. Okay, so this was an issue with my video that I saw raised by a few people, and I think what we have here is a bit of a misunderstanding. Firstly, everyone who complained about this heard the same thing, which was me saying nobody asked for ray tracing, which wasn't what I said. What I said was, as far as I can tell, nobody really wants it. Now, you might say, well, you're splitting hairs here. That's pretty much exactly the same thing. And, well, yeah, it kind of is, but as is often the case, context is important. So what I really said was, this technology, so ray tracing, is basically being crammed down the throats of gamers, and as far as I can tell, nobody really wants it, at least in its current form, and that's the real problem. The current hardware implementation really isn't good enough to be of any real benefit. So I'm not saying nobody asked for ray tracing, and I'm not saying nobody wants it. I'm saying in its current form, there are very few gamers who want to pay a premium for it. Look, if we could turn on DXR and suffer a small performance impact for a noticeable difference to the way the game looked, without any glitches such as shimmering and all that kind of stuff, then hell yeah, sign me up for ray tracing. But what we've seen so far is nowhere near justifies enabling DXR. So I'm talking about Battlefield 5, obviously. Sure, that's my opinion, but I think given the feedback of, well, the vast majority of you and other reviewers and guys who are into tech and play games, I feel like my opinion here really isn't out of line or that unusual or differs much from the norm. Okay, I'll sort of summarize this one. I'll throw the whole comment up on the screen so I don't misrepresent Eric here. There was a few people that did bring up sort of a similar argument. Not 100% sure why, but I made the comment saying the RTX 2080 and 1080 Ti have basically the same performance. So he's pretty well correctly quoted me there, but then sort of seems to misinterpret what I was saying. Anyway, I'll read out part of the comment. The RTX 2080 consistently outperforms the 1080 Ti in the vast majority of games, and the few titles that the 1080 Ti wins in are typically older titles such as GTA 5. Furthermore, if you compare titles such as Wolfenstein 2, where adaptive shading is used, the 2080 absolutely crushes the 1080 Ti. With driver optimizations and all that sort of stuff on the horizon, he expects the 2080 to pull further ahead, then add on the top features like DLSS, ray tracing, lower power consumption, and NVLink support. It's clear that the 2080 is superior to the 1080 Ti. Okay, so rewind. Based on all that, Eric B is upset that I said the RTX 2080 and 1080 Ti have basically the same performance. I think that's fair. Unless my testing differs a lot from what others have found, yeah, it's technically not an untrue statement. It's not really even misleading to say so. Naturally, you would assume based on what I've said there that they are very similar on average. They deliver similar performance. The 2080 is a little bit faster, but not a whole lot faster. So Yeah, not sure. So he's correct. In newer games, the 2080 is up to 10 to 15% faster, but it's not all newer games. We've seen some newer games where it's actually slower, and it's certainly slower in older games like GTA 5. So yeah, again, it wasn't really a whole lot faster on average. I think it was 1% from memory, so not a whole lot faster. Eric then goes on about DLSS, which personally I'm still not sold on. I know Tim's not. I think a lot of you guys are still waiting for more games and further investigation into how good that looks and if there's any issues with it. I don't think I need to say too much more about ray tracing. I think I've covered that one probably already in this video, but I've certainly covered my opinion on it before so far. The same goes for NVLink. I don't know why guys make NVLink out to be some sort of special godlike SLI mode. Not sure about that one. And just finally wrapping this one up, Eric B says at the end of his comment, if you want to compare the 1080 Ti and 2080, then comment something like, the 2080 is slightly faster than the 1080 Ti. Would be more accurate, as saying they have the same performance is a bit disingenuous. But again, Eric, you've quoted exactly what I said. I didn't say the same, I said basically the same. So yeah, I never said that. It would be disingenuous to say that they are the same because they're not the same. A 1% difference across, it's not the same. So yeah, I said it's basically the same performance because on average, the 2080 was 1% faster in my testing. So yeah. Okay, Tom's has a question here. I'm just going to read the start of it. I just want to focus on the DLSS part. He says, please redo the benchmarks when DLSS is a thing. Yeah, look, DLSS isn't a thing that we can just redo the benchmarks with. The games have to implement support for the technology, and so far we only have one example of that, and it's a pretty bad example. In fact, it's so bad that Tim didn't really bother revisiting. He's waiting for it to come, or waiting for a better game to support it, because he says that the AA implementation in Final Fantasy is pretty garbage. So yeah, it's by no means coming to all games. But hopefully, for the sake of RTX owners, support will dramatically improve this year. Okay, Kelly Ozor says, MSI backplate is plastic or metal. Tech Deal says it's plastic, but it really looks like metal, so I'm confused. Well, we've got it here. It's very cool. It's very cool, and yeah, it's aluminium or aluminum, depending on where you are in the world. But yeah, aluminium. Definitely 100% aluminium. The shroud on the top is plastic, but yeah, backplate is brushed aluminium. Looks pretty snazzy, and yeah, moving on. Okay, Rex Rat says, what was your reasoning for saying this wouldn't be worth the upgrade over the 980 Ti? So I said it wouldn't be worth upgrading from a 980 Ti to the RTX 2060, and then he just says it's just a case of performance increase not being worth the $350. Yeah, the 980 Ti is similar to the GTX 1070 in terms of performance. If you overclock the 980 Ti, I think it's a little bit faster than a stock GTX 1070. So anyway, what all that means is that an RTX 2060 is going to be maybe 10% faster on average than a GTX 980 Ti. So spending $350 US for a 10% bump doesn't really seem worth it to me. Okay, last comment here that we're going to look at. This one's kind of a feel-good nice one, but yeah, just wanted to touch on it. There were plenty of really nice supportive comments, so thank you very much for all of those. Noshi says, honestly, you do great work, even if there are points I disagree with, which there seldom are. You present your arguments well, and they're based on facts. Don't let immature behavior of some bother you. You and Tim both seem well-grounded on your reviews. Keep up the great work. So yeah, big thank you there to Noshi and everyone else who did leave positive comments and feedback and stuff on that video. That's always great. And it's always really nice to hear from someone who can disagree with us on some things, seldom or otherwise, but they can disagree with us but still engage in discussion and yeah, have a positive discussion, I guess is what I'm trying to say. That's always really nice because it's always very disappointing to me when we come across some comment where someone said unsubbed. It actually happened once or twice on that video. And then I asked for if they're willing to give a reason for why they're deciding to announce that they're unsubscribing. Both of these people came back and they said that they no longer agree with some of the things I say or a lot of the things I say. And yeah, I mean, I thought that was a bit disappointing because it's always good to have difference of opinions. Sometimes you can agree to disagree. But the opinions and the feedback from you guys has helped shape and refine our reviews. And we don't always agree, but sometimes it changes the way we look at things, or maybe we thought that wasn't the best way of going about things. And that's why we always spend so much time trying to interact with you guys in the comments, and it's probably a reason why we've led to this reply to comment series as well. But yeah, always a bit disappointing when people who don't agree with you can't even have any kind of conversation. But anyway, getting away from that sort of negative stuff, again, it's really great to hear comments like Noshi's, and there was loads of them. So again, thank you to everyone who took the time, showed their support, or just left some sort of positive feedback. As always, it is very much appreciated. Okay, well that about wraps it up. The big ones here were my botching of the cost per frame data. Thankfully, that didn't impact the conclusion in any way, because if it did, I'd have to pull the video, redo it, and re-upload it. So I guess there's that. And it also didn't affect the RTX 2060 or any of its direct competitors, but it did make the lower-end cards look much more impressive than they are in terms of value. The other big topics were VRAM capacity, something that I'll be sure to keep an eye on. Very interested to test all the new big AAA titles that are coming out this year and see how the RTX 2060 compares to something like the RTX 2070 in those titles, and Vega and all that sort of stuff. And then the other thing is, you can trust day one reviews. So we didn't mean to suggest, if we did to anyone, that wasn't the case in the video about Nvidia and our RTX 2060 woes. Actually, on that topic, there is one more thing I would like to touch on, something we also discussed in the Patreon live stream. The takeaway for some people regarding that RTX 2060 review, I think it was titled something like, "Did Nvidia screw us?" But yeah, the takeaway from that video for a lot of people were that we were just upset we didn't get our free sample. I feel like it was explained better than that, or at least it should have been, so that shouldn't have been the takeaway. But if not, if I didn't explain it as well as I thought I did, which is certainly possible, the core issue here being that we were concerned Nvidia was trying to mute our coverage because they didn't like what we had to say about the RTX series. And if that was the case, we certainly wouldn't be the last to get the axe. The next most critically objective media outlet would now no doubt be the next to go. So yeah, we were kind of hoping to put a stop to that one before it got too out of hand. We were also frustrated with the fact that Nvidia, we were frustrated with how they handled the situation, I guess. It's just the quickest way to go about that one. They promised us a sample in time for our day one coverage. That didn't happen. They had us sign NDAs, so that turned out to be pretty well pointless since we had no information to leak. They then hit us with a generic response when we asked why other media outlets had samples. For now, we're still waiting to hear back from Nvidia on the issue, so we have no idea if we'll be sampled for the next product release or if we'll have to go somewhere else. So yeah, I guess time will tell on that one. But yeah, that's pretty much everything I think I needed to or wanted to cover in this video. I think I'll end it here before I continue to ramble on about things, because there has been quite a bit of rambling in this video, a lot more than usual. Anyway, if you want to see more content from us, if all my rambling in this video hasn't put you off, and you can subscribe. You can support us on Patreon. That'll give you access to our monthly live streams where we discuss a whole heap of stuff over multiple hours, and our Discord chat where we chat with you guys on a very regular basis. Anyway, that is going to do it for this one. I am your host, Steve. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you again next time.